Misfits, and welcome! In this episode, I want to talk all about how to deal with the choices our players make. When they do something crazy that you aren't expecting, how do you handle that? What is your process for trying to go along with it or tell them no? All those things. And just like any of my other videos, this is what I do. This is my process, how I sort of approach the things that my players decide to do. This might not work for you, and this is also not going to be like a one-stop fix for being just sort of confused by the things our players throw at us. This is just sort of advice on how to approach those situations. So just bear that in mind. Take from this what you will, use what you like, throw out the rest. So this video is actually really hard to make because you can't really just sort of put in bullet points your process for thinking on the fly. It's not really something that can be done, but you can over time sort of learn how to adapt and kind of develop a process for how you approach certain scenarios. So this will sort of be my take on that, but this is not going to be some list of like, here are the crazy improv ideas that you can rely on when your players teleport or when your players don't turn right when you expected them to, those kinds of things. So just keep all of that in mind. So number one, my advice would be to adopt the yes and kind of process. You might hear in sort of improv, comedy, and acting, yes and. So we never say no to a scenario that somebody has thrown at us. We always say yes, and we try to add to it and keep it going and keep the story going and keep that momentum. So number one, I would recommend that you try and go along with some of the crazy things that your players might throw at you, or just the things that they throw at you that you weren't expecting. It's not always crazy, just sometimes it's crazy. So yeah, I would say try to go along with it. There are lots of scenarios in which a player might do something you're not expecting, like they go walk up to somebody that didn't exist before now, and they just decide that they want to talk to them or learn about the town. You can say, yes, you can go and talk to them, and they tell you this information, or yes, you go try to talk to them and they happen to be a mute, so you're gonna have to engage in some elaborate game of charades to try and communicate with this person. You can do yes, you go up to talk to them and they are secretly evil and they turn around and try to stab you. Roll for initiative. There are lots of ways that you can take just any random thing and yes and it and continue on and build off of that. So I would really encourage you to do that as much as you can, and the more you do it, the more comfortable with that you will become. Number two, this almost completely contradicts what I just said. Know when to say no, okay? So yeah, we want to try and go along with the stuff that our players throw at us, but within reason. If they're throwing out an idea that totally breaks the world or goes against the rules of your fictitious society, you're allowed to say no. You are the dungeon master. You are running the game and steering the story, and you provide the framework for which they work within, where they tell the story within. You are the guidelines and the rules. It is you. That's your role as the dungeon master. So you can say no. If somebody says, if one of your players is just like, all right, yeah, I know we're in a hallway and I see this guy right up ahead of me, and you know what? I'm just gonna go like pickpocket the dungeon keys off of his person, and oh look, I rolled a nat 20, so I guess that just means it happens. You as the dungeon master can say, no, actually the hallway you're in is well lit and the walls are lined with mirrors, so it's impossible for you to pick the key out of his pocket. So no, you can't do that right now. But, that's a clever idea. Maybe if you get an opportunity later, you can try it. You can say no. You are allowed to do that. And that doesn't make you a bad person for doing it. As long as you don't say no every single time, if you know what I mean. Because then you're just the person that's putting the damper on the fun. So, within reason, listen to your players' ideas, figure out if they're possible, and if you can work with what they've given you. And if you can't, and if they're kind of crazy or out there or just don't really fit within, sort of your world, you can say no. So, number 3, know how to use railroading effectively. And I really hesitate to use the word railroading because it's pretty, hot button term in Dungeons and Dragons. But, there's definitely good railroading and there's definitely bad railroading. So let's talk about those two first. Bad railroading completely eliminates player choice and agency. Anything the players do, any decisions they make don't matter because you have already decided how everything is going to turn out. And that's really frustrating because I feel like the essence of what makes D&D so special is the fact that we can come in and not know how the story is going to end, and the decisions we make and the things we do and how we respond to things are what affect the story and change it and make it our own. I feel like that's such a key aspect of Dungeons and Dragons. So to take that away, you're sort of almost killing the spirit of the game, if that makes sense. But there is good railroading, I would think. And when I think of good railroading, I almost think of this image where you have a track leading to a situation and it branches off in all these different paths and then it sort of comes back together. You're still allowing player choice and agency. They still are able to make decisions that affect how they approach the next scene, the next quest, the next arc. But you don't necessarily have to throw out everything you've prepared in allowing them to have those decisions. You can still adapt and use what you've already made despite the fact that the players have done something that you don't expect. Now, you can't do this all the time, but let's say the next arc that you have planned and you've prepared everything for, maps, monsters, what name you, is exploring a red dragon's lair. You can present a bunch of different options for how your players get into that scenario, and you can allow them to come up with their own ideas on how to approach that. Maybe they disguise themselves as a bunch of dragon cultists and they just sort of waltz in. Maybe they, search around the perimeter and find a back entrance and they sneak in that way. Maybe they barge through the front door, guns blazing. Maybe they magically teleport into the middle of the lair. You've allowed your players to approach the scenario however they wish. They have all these different options, and it will affect the way that final scene plans out or carries out. You still get to use your maps and your monsters that you've prepared, but you might go about it sort of a different way depending on what they've done. If they waltz in disguised as cultists, well, now you might end up RPing some conversation between your players and a dragon, and that is totally different and would involve a lot of deception rolls and persuasion checks and stuff. If they sneak in the back, that of course is going to have a lot of stealth rolls tied to it, and maybe they get a surprise round and they get to, surprise some baddies hidden inside. If they barge in, guns blazing, there is no element of surprise, and they might find themselves faced with a pretty tough fight because everybody heard them coming. And then if they magically teleport into the center, I think in that scenario, everybody is surprised because nobody knows what to expect, and you would approach that differently as well. So you still have all these branching options, but you still get to use what you have prepared. And maybe a lot of that also stems from the way in which you prepare your next arcs and scenes. You leave a lot up to be sort of determined later based on what your characters do. You don't flesh out full-on conversations and have every word written out. You kind of wait and you try to be a little bit more reactive to what your players do. There's a lot of different sort of takes on that. But I do think, like, it's still in some ways railroading because you're still guiding them towards like one thing that's already been prepared, but you are still fully allowing your players to make decisions and have agency in the story, and I think that's what's really, really important here. And obviously this can't be used all the time. There are decisions that your players are going to make that would totally throw out everything you've prepared. Like if they decide not to enter the dragon lair at all, well, there goes your dragon lair. And it's up to you to decide whether you want to allow that, yes and, or if you want to tell them no. And, you know, there are a lot of sort of ways to approach that, and that's really up to you as the dungeon master to decide how you would sort of approach that decision. But hopefully you have a little bit more tools here to sort of help you with that. So number 4, try to relegate big decisions to the end of the session. And this is something that's going to take a lot of practice because it's going to take time for you to figure out how long a session lasts for you. Some groups just play until they reach a conclusion that they're satisfied with for that day. Some groups, like mine, have a very set amount of time that we can play per week, and we can't really go past that. So it's going to take time for you to figure out how long your sessions last. It took me a little while, but now I know, like, pretty solidly what I can accomplish in a session. But what I mean by regulating big decisions to the end of the session, like, let's say you and your group in the story are coming up to a big crossroads. There's going to be a big decision where they have to decide where they're going to go next, who they're going to talk to next, what quest they're going to start next. It's a big decision, and that's going to really affect the kinds of things that you need to prepare. You might not want to start a session with them deciding whether they want to go to the castle, the ocean port, or the mountain cave, because then the whole session is them at those places, and if you don't have all of that prepared, you're in trouble. If you move that decision to happen towards the end of the session, then you have all the time in between the session that's just now ending and the next one to prepare the area that they're going to. If you can tell that they're about to have to travel somewhere and they need to decide where they want to go, try to have that decision happen at the very end of the session. That gives you the most time to prepare. And it's not easy. It'll take a little bit of time and sort of learning how to steer the conversations and story, but it's certainly possible, and that's highly what I would recommend. There have certainly been some situations in which I have not done that, and when I have done that. And a lot of times, if the big decision on where to go and what to do happens at the beginning of the session, despite my planning, I will find ways to sort of stall and fill out the session. Like, you know, you've got your traveling random tables and, you know, have people come in and you can RP a lot of conversations and fill out some time. there are ways to go about that. But if you can, have that decision happen at the end, then you have all that time before the next session to prepare your maps and your monsters and figure out exactly what you want them to find when they get there. Number 5, communication. When in doubt, talk it out. Seriously, I do think, maybe I'll make a whole separate video on this, but I really think like 99% of all problems in D&D can be solved with communication. If your players throw something at you and it completely stumps you and stresses you out, talk to them about it. Let them know that these big things that happen, these sort of big decisions that they make that can really change the story, let them know that they need to kind of telegraph that to you and warn you about that. I have certainly talked to my players a lot, and they know that if they want to go somewhere, they really need to let me know where they want to go and when they want to go there ahead of time so that I can prepare stuff for them. Some of them might not realize how much stuff we have to prepare, how long it takes to prepare things. Some of them might think we can do more on the fly than we actually can. So by sort of letting them know how much work and effort goes into DMing, they're going to be a lot more gracious about like letting you know things ahead of time and warning you about things. Not just travel, but like if they plan to use like a magic item in a really interesting way, or they want to use a spell in a very atypical way, you need to know that ahead of time if you can, just so you know how to react to it. And if it's a really cool idea, the more time you have, the more you can work with it and make sure that that idea happens and pans out. If they stump you with it on the fly, you might be more inclined to tell them no as opposed to working with it. So, let your players know that. Let them know that it's not like a DM versus player thing. It's, if we have more time to prepare and we know more ahead of time, we can better tailor the story to them and cater the adventure to them and their ideas. Make sure that they're aware of that, because there is sort of that, and maybe at some tables it's true, but I think a lot of people think that it's like the DM versus the player, and at least for me, that is as far away from the truth as possible. Yeah, that's just not a thing at my table, at least. So I actually do have an example in which my players threw something at me that really stumped me, and I used all 5 of these things in my sort of response and reaction to what they did. This is an incident that happened in Campaign 1, and the recording is actually out, so I will talk about it a little bit, but just sort of, I guess, a light warning if you haven't watched, or not watched, but listened to Campaign 1, there's going to be some slight spoilers here. I'll try to be somewhat vague, but still, I want to talk about it and give you guys a real example. So, my players were coming up to a big crossroads. They knew that they wanted to go to this dwarven town, but they were unsure about when to go there, what route to take to go there, and sort of the method in which they wanted to go there. So this was the big decision. And fortunately, like I said in number 4, I made sure that this decision happened towards the end of the session so that I would have as much time as possible to adapt to what they decided. Now, what I threw in there to sort of raise the stakes was that the country they were in had just declared war on their sort of enemy country, which happened to be the same country that this dwarven town was in. So now travel's about to be a lot more difficult because these two countries are going to start waging war against each other. I threw that in there to raise the stakes and sort of show that, things were getting a lot more serious in the story. We were approaching the 3rd act of this, sort of epic quest tale and stuff. But I kind of didn't really account for how freaked out that would make my players about the idea of traveling. They have a ship, so I assumed, wrongfully, that they would use their ship to travel. And despite the fact that there was this new threat of war, they'd encounter some things along the way. It would be difficult, but they would still get there. I thought it wouldn't be that much of an issue. It was definitely a big issue, and that really gave them a lot of pause, and it made them start to think a little bit more creatively on how they wanted to get to this dwarven town. Also, a mistake that I made is they had very recently been helped in an encounter by an ally of theirs, and he helped them by teleporting to where they are and joining in the fight. So now they're afraid to travel via ship because of war, and 2, they've remembered that they have a friend that can teleport. This was my mistake, but it's okay. So they present the idea as they're discussing how they want to go about things. They present the idea of contacting this guy and having him teleport them to the dwarven town. And if you go back and listen, I believe you can hear at the start that I'm like, I don't know if he'd do that. But, the more I think about it in the moment, I'm like, why wouldn't he help them? He just teleported to save them in a fight. Why wouldn't he help them? So I decide to go the route of yes and. And so when they cast sending and talk to him, I'm like, yeah, I can teleport you to that place. Sure, I'll do that, no problem. Knowing full and well that I have just now thrown out every idea I had about planned encounters along the way, towns they were going to stop in along the way, I willingly just goodbye, and pushed that aside and told them yes and. But I still sort of used a little bit of number 2 of knowing when to say no and knowing when to sort of put a damper on things by having this teleporting character say, I'll get you there, but I can't stay to take you out. So I will get you to that location, but I'm not going to go on that full quest through that town with you. I'm not going to hang around until you need a ride out. You're going to have to figure that out and see how that works. Pause for the train. There's a little bit of a train. Always, every time. So I put some damper on their decision and make sure that there are limits to this idea that they have. And that sort of helps and sort of makes them think about things a little bit more critically and lets them know that, they don't have just a free out from now on. They don't just have a guy that's going to teleport them wherever they want, whenever they want. I sort of set up I'll get you there, but I'm too busy to stay there and run around with you. And I think that was really, really important. So that was something. So I think I've covered 4 and 1 and 2. Now, know how to use railroading effectively. There were a lot of things that I had planned or intended to do, on their way to this dwarven town. And I found ways to incorporate a lot of those back into the story after the fact. So even though the route they took to get to those sort of encounters and things was not what I intended, because they threw this teleportation sort of problem in the mix of it, I still got to use a lot of that stuff. And, the dwarven town was always something I intended for them to go to. I just thought they would get there a lot later. So that was a little bit different. So I sort of still steering the story back around to some of the things I've prepared, but still allowing their decisions and their choices to affect how they get there and affect how all of that plans out. And then number 5, communication. Yeah, so after this happens, you can hear it. You can hear it in the recording. They have their big discussion. It's like, all right, we're going to teleport. And then the second the session ends, I'm like, hey, so we're probably going to have to take 2 weeks off so I can prepare this dwarven town that I did not intend for you to go to. And I'll let them know that. And I'll let them know that, going forward, now that teleportation is a thing to worry about in the game, that if they can communicate that to me and where they want to teleport to ahead of time, that would be super helpful. So in that one sort of situation, because they come up with that idea like so quick. In that one situation, I use all 5 of those things to sort of figure out how I'm going to handle that. And I still use all of those things to this day, and they still surprise me all the time. And that's not even like the worst teleportation thing. I hinted at one of them at the end. There's a plane shift moment. The recording's not out, but that one was so rough. It's fine. It's all fine. But that's sort of my like real world example. Real fantasy world example. Anyway, so that's kind of all I have for this video. This is a really difficult sort of topic to talk about because there's really no clear-cut answer. There's no like perfect response to the crazy stuff that players throw at their DMs. There's just sort of ways we can learn to sort of adapt to it. But this is what I've got for this video. As with anything, if you liked this content and you liked any of the stuff on this channel, please feel free to like and subscribe. Please comment below and tell me about how you handle the choices that your players make and how you adapt to their craziness and spontaneity and creativity. I would love to hear about all of that. And with that, I hope you guys have a lovely day, and I will see you again next time. It's almost Christmas time. It's almost Christmas time, and we have picked out our holiday one-shot, and hopefully we will be playing it very soon. I'm very excited. It's sort of like a kind of like a retelling of the Nutcracker story. I'm pretty partial to that story myself. I grew up doing a lot of dance and was definitely in the Nutcracker many a time. But I'm really, really excited about it, so hopefully that will go up, later this month, and I hope you guys will enjoy it. I don't really have much of an in bit here, so I guess this is just me chatting and just saying hi, and all those things. I hope you guys have a good sort of holiday season. I have yet to decide whether I'm gonna attempt to take some sort of break or vacation. It might depend on how much I can record or get prepared ahead of time to sort of time out to post while I am enjoying my time off. We shall see. But I don't know. This stuff's fun to do though, so we'll see. Maybe I'll keep doing it through the break. We'll find out. But hope you guys have a good day, and I'll see you again next time.